Welcome back to our creative videos. I am Loretta Hayes from Hayes Sewing Machine Company in Wilmington, Delaware. And today we're going to do a quick and easy project which is off of a Villa Rosa postcard. The postcard is called Rebecca Jane and it is a reversible sewing machine cover. So when you're starting out for this, you basically need to do this. You need 6 fat quarters. One fat quarter would be on one side of the cover. Second one is going to be on the back side of the cover. Third one is going to be over the top. And then we're going to have the same thing because it's reversible on the inside. So raid your stash, find 6 fat quarters that you like, and you're ready to go. So in the cutting out, they give you the dimensions for cutting out on the pattern. But the one thing to really kind of point out to you is they refer to as an A side and a B side. So the A side is like what you would normally have on the outside, and the B side is kind of the lining part of it. And so the big thing to be aware of is that the B side are all 1 inch taller than the A side. And there's a little trick on the finishing off that will make that apparent why they've done that. But let's go ahead and get started on our A side. So for the A side, I am going to have 2 pieces that are 12 by 19 rectangles, and then they are curved up at the top. And honestly, we did not get anything mathematical. We did not use a compass. We literally took a paper plate and put the paper plate down and did our curve from there. With our third fat quarter for the top, we cut 2 pieces that are 20 inches by 8 inches. So we've got 2 pieces, and those are going to be the gusset pieces that are going over the top. The last piece that you can cut out is optional, and that is a little handle that will make getting the cover on and off a little bit easier. So I simply took and had the sewing machines, I know what those are, sewing machines, as the same as the one front piece on the cover. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out with the gusset. You don't have to have your machine set up really fancily. This is just straight stitching and with a regular foot, because the seam allowances on this project are 1/2 inch as opposed to 1/4 inch. So we're going to take our 2 gusset pieces, put them right sides together, and we're going to do a 1/2 inch seam on the short side of our rectangle. So we'll line up on the 1/2 inch mark on the plate, and then off we go. We got a lot of thread there. Let's get rid of some of that. Sorry about that. I forgot to put my foot. And of course it's all the way at the top of the list. So we're going to come in, and now my machine will be happy. So we're just going to go ahead. We're going to do a little back tack. So certainly nothing complicated about this. Do our little back tack again, and then cut our thread. And we're going to hop this over to the ironing board in a bit so that Pam doesn't have to go back and forth so much. So let's go ahead and do the handle as well. So the handle, we're going to fold in half lengthwise, and we're going to do a 1/2 inch seam running down the side of it. No need to back tack. This is going to get caught in the seam. And then we're going to grab a fast turn. You know, we'd like to get this flipped around, but the problem is always when you're doing these things is, you know, you have to really work at it to do that. So if you've not used a fast turn, you take the brass tube and you put the brass tube through the fabric tube. And then at the end of the wire, you will notice that there is a kind of corkscrew piece. So we're going to come through the fast turn. So the wire's going through the brass tube. It will poke out on the end, and we will simply poke it through the fabric and twist it until that corkscrew piece comes through. And then we're simply going to go ahead and pull that back and through the tube. So super, super simple. I even used the tube to kind of poke out the end that we were hooked into. So we are now set for our handle. So now we'll head over to the ironing board so we can do 2 for at once. And rather than trying to spend a lot of time lining up my seam along the edge, because the handle, you're only going to see one side of it, unlike a bag handle where you might flip it. I'm simply going to line up the seam roughly down the center of the back of the handle, and we'll give that a press and flip that over. And then that way I've got 2 really pretty edges. I don't have anything where I have to shift it a little bit for the seam. And then we'll come over and we'll do our rectangle. Remember, this is our gusset piece, and we're just going to go ahead and we're going to press that open. So we'll press it from the back side first, and then we'll flip it over. Just give it a little tug to make sure we don't have an accordion pleat. All right, so now we're heading back to the sewing machine. So we're going to pick up one of our pieces for the side. And before you forget, go ahead and clip on or pin on your handle on one side of your gusset. So you can see with the gusset, I've pinned it on, and I've pinned it on so that the seam that I just sewed is being covered by my handle. All right, then we're going to take our gusset and we're going to fold our gusset in half. And so we'll find a little halfway mark there, and we're going to come in and we're going to pick that up and pin that right to the seam and where the handle is. So we'll throw that on. So now we have our gusset marked to the halfway point of our side. Now, for the pattern, they said for us to pin this all the way along the edge, but a much easier way of doing this, rather than sewing from the bottom up through the top and back down to the bottom, is to start your seam at the seam of the gusset. So literally halfway. We're going to then sew this little bit of straight. And all I'm doing is lining up the edge about 1 inch or 2 ahead. Now we're coming into the corner, and this is the reason why I'm not a big fan of the pinning of this, because oftentimes when you've got those pins in there, you end up like sewing in a little tuck. So literally I'm just going to line up about 1 inch. I'm going to take my hand and pull that fabric over to the side. I'll line up another 1 inch. And I'll just work my way around the curve. And if you need to, like I'm feeling like I really need to pivot a little bit, there's nothing that says we can't pick up the foot and then put the foot back down. So we'll line that up, put the presser foot back down, and we'll work our way around. Once you get around that curve, I'm going to reach down here at the bottom. I'm going to make certain that my 2 bottom pieces line up. And then off we go. Do a little back tack at the end and cut our thread. Now we're going to just flip over, start at that same spot, and work the other side. So much easier. Nothing is more frustrating to me when you're doing something with a gusset, when you sew up the top and then you come around and then you're like an inch off on the other end, because then you have to seam ripper that whole seam out to get it corrected. By starting halfway each time, you're really helping yourself with that. There's less likelihood of the fabric doing any shifting. So once again, as you go around your curve, it's kind of a little sew an inch, stop an inch, sew an inch, you know, work your way around. And if your machine has needle stop down, that's a great place to use needle stop down. So now I'm on the straight, so I'm going to go back over here. We're going to line up on the edge, line up on our fabric. My hand in the way. Pam is
The
fabric's in the way.
There you go.
There you go. And if you're a quilter, 1/2 inch seam allowance seem like they're so big. So try not to drift back over to the 1/4. So at this point, when we flip it over, we've got one side of our cover in. It is so much easier to press the seam allowances now rather than getting the other side and trying to work into a little kind of pillow shape. So we're going to go over to the ironing board. I'm going to be pressing these seam allowances towards the gusset. So I will line that up. Flip my seam allowances to the gusset. I like to press from the top side. So we'll come in, press your corner. And you'll be able to feel the seam allowances with your fingers, and then you can come in and hit them with the iron. When you get to that handle, remember the handle kind of wants to do its own thing, so we need to like train it to go in towards the top. And we'll just work our way along, and one more side. So you can see how it's a little easier to get one of these seams done while you have it open. Now, before you leave the ironing board, to make your curves look a little prettier, we're going to come in and we're going to do just a little bit of clipping. So really just on the curve, we're going to take a sharp pair of scissors and we're going to just clip, clip. And I'm doing mine maybe every 1/2 inch. And you can see how the gusset fabric wants to curl, but once we clip it, it'll take and lay nice and flat. And I think we just need one more clip on that corner. All right, so let's flip it over and we'll clip the other side. And when you're clipping, you know, you want to get pretty close to that seam. There's no point in clipping if we're just clipping like, oops, this little bit at the top here. We need to make sure that we go all the way down into the seam, but try not to go past the seam. And I think one more clip ought to do it. And you can see how that corner will now spread out nice and flat. See from both sides?
Mm-hmm.
All right. All right, we are back to the sewing machine. And we get to do it all again. so we're going to come in. Very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do my handle. The handle, by the way, sticks up a little bit from the cover. So when you are picking it up, it'll be like that. So be aware of that. I think if you wanted it more flat, you could also put it as a flat and just cut off the end. But I went with the measurements exactly how the pattern went. So you would see how the pattern would look. All right, fold our half piece. Pin that on our mark. And then we're 1/2 inch seam allowancing it all the way around, starting from the top and working down one side. Get into our corner, so we're going to come in. Going to do a little bit, 1 inch at a time. Work your way around that corner. And then back to fabric together. Do our little back tack, cut our thread, and back up to the top. And you'll see that I have my, I've inadvertently sewn my seam allowance there. No need to pull that out. It's going to all be on the inside, but I will want to flatten it out. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to clip that so that the seam allowance is going to lay flat. We only use the seam ripper if we absolutely have to. All right, and off we go again. So as we're going around that curve, you may notice that normally we put our 2 pieces of fabric together and we kind of hold our fabric. But in this case, I've got one fabric in one hand and the bottom fabric. So I've got my top fabric in my left hand and I've got my bottom fabric in my right, so that I can guide them pretty much independently. What will sometimes happen when you're doing these techniques is like one will go one direction and one will go the other direction. So by having a hand on each individual piece, it makes it much easier to get around that curve, and it also means that you have an accurate seam allowance when you're done. All right, so we're around that curve. We're going to come back. We're going to line up those ends. And we'll take it. And I'm going to cut my thread here for just a second. I just want to show you, this is the only time that I've had an issue with it. So I'm going along like this, right? Okay, so it looks all pretty right there, right? Can you see the problem over here? Can you see I'm 1/4 of an inch short? So just a really quick little tip is you can come and stop if you have that. This is like a quilting technique. Always put the big on the bottom. And so those feed dogs will help feed that in so that when I'm finished, just overlap those seam allowances a little bit. I'm going to have that seam being lined up right along the edge. All right, let's go over to the ironing board, and once again, we are pressing towards the gusset. So in my case, that is the little thimbles. Now, in that little section that I eased in, I have a little bit of a ruffle. Not much, but a little bit. So this is where things like best press is fabulous. You can press a little bit of best press. We give that a press towards the gusset. And take a look at that. Can you see it from the camera? It's laying perfectly flat.
Nobody would ever know.
No one will ever know. We won't tell. All right, so let's work the corner.
Your arm's in the way.
Sorry. And we're getting to where our handle is. So remember, we're training that handle to go towards the gusset. I'm left-handed. The hand just goes there.
Excuses, excuses.
All right. And then the last one down the side. All right, and then before we take off, we're going to come back in, do a quick clip on our corners. And we definitely don't want that one. These are good. You don't need to worry about. I just thought if I picked a bigger pair, I'd go faster, but not really. All right, so that one's looking nice. And we'll flip over and we'll do our other curve. And I think one more. Nice. All right. So now you can see what's going on with our cover. So let's throw this on the machine over here, just so that you can kind of see. All right, so see how that's going to work? And so we're going to have our little handle going in like that.
Can you show the handle again?
Yeah, sure.
Got it.
So it'll go whoop, and I pulled it off.
Ta-da!
All right. So in the magic that is YouTube, you've done this for side A. You're then going to do side B.
Wow, you're fast.
That's super fast, right? And so on side B, if you remember when I started the video, that side B was cut 1 inch longer on each of the pieces. So the reason for that is because side B is going to be the finishing side. So what I've done at the bottom of the side B, once I've got everything pressed and clipped, and just like we did on side A, I simply took and folded up a 1/2 inch and pressed it, and then flipped it over and pressed and did the second side. So we have a double hem at the bottom 1/2 inch, which took up that extra inch that we cut. Now we're going to come in, we're going to flip our A side, wrong side out, and we're going to come in and we're going to slide the raw edge of A under the flipped hem of B. And we would like to line up the seams. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to line up the 2 gusset seams, and I'm going to flip that over. And I think for this, clips are definitely going to be the way to go. So we'll come over here, we'll line up the seam over here. We'll throw a clip in there. Let's flip over and do the same on the other side. So we're tucking A into B. I thought this was really innovative because then you didn't have to have a long strip to say do a separate binding. And of course a binding you're going to have to sew 2 times. This we're just going to go all the way around once. So I thought that was pretty cool. All right, now that our 2 ends are clipped, now I can kind of pull at it, and it naturally wants to fold and line up. So I'm just going to do a little tucking, make sure it's all the way at the bottom of the hem. We'll throw a couple of clips on that side. And then we'll flip it around.
It's clever.
It is. I thought it was clever. When I was looking at the cutout, I'm like, why are they doing 1 inch longer? That's not going to stay right. Read a little further. All right, so now we are clipped around, and you can see how fast that was. All right, so we're going to come in, and we're going to want to do a little top stitching. So we can come in. I'm going to line up my top stitching on the side, one of the sides, just because I think it'll hide a little bit better. And we'll come in, and I'll get the fabric out of the way in just a second, Pam. I'm getting the thumbs. Move that fabric. All right, so I'm going to sew about 1/8 of an inch in. So I'm going to run the edge of my fabric along the inside edge of my toe. I'm going to lengthen my stitch length just a tad for top stitching. I usually, normal seam was 2.5. I'm going to run it about 3. And so we're just going to run. You get to your clip. Don't try and sew over your clip. Pull your clip out. And while this is the longest seam kind of going around, just take it as 3 or 4 inches at a time. Get that lined up so that, and then work your way around. When I get down to that final piece of gusset, so you can see right here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just do a little gentle pull so that by the time I get back, I'm not going to end up with a little tuck there. So just by gently pull. It's one of those situations where if you pull and you've got, say, 6 inches of fabric, if there's a little variance, it'll be fine. But if you get 1 inch from the end and try and pull, you're going to be seam ripping. All right, we're going to overlap just a little bit. We'll do a little bit of a back tack, nothing big, because we don't want it to show up too badly. And we're going to come in and cut our thread. And we'll do just a little trim up of that beginning thread. And we are complete. So let's demo again on the sewing machine. So if you are going to have side B facing you, it's going to be this lovely pink gusset with sewing machines and writing and like all about stitching. And then if we flip it around,
oh, too many choices.
you could get, yes, I know, because like you could go like one week and one the other. And when you flip it over, and you can see that the hem looks really pretty on the
Look at
bottom
that.
there. And so now we've got the thimbles, so you can pick out what you'd like. So these particular fabrics, they're sewing fabrics, and we actually have this kitted up in the store with these particular fabrics. But we also have kits for this that are just random coordinated fat quarters that we've done. You can also just raid your stash for 6 fat quarters and just get the pattern. So there's lots of variations if you want to use up some fabric or if you want like machine specific fabric working with it. What I loved about the cover is the sewing machine that I'm sewing on is a 590, and you can see it's a Bernina 590, and so you can see that it has a little bit wider throat, and a lot of sewists have got a little bit wider machines because they're accommodating for quilting or that kind of thing. So it gives you a little bit more space. If you do a lot of curtains, home deck, having a wider space machine just makes things more convenient. But what's really cool is this cover is going to fit that machine. However, if you've got a gigantic machine, so let's say that you have a Baby Lock Chorus or a Bernina 7 series machine. This is a 5 series machine. It covers it with a little bit of ease. A 7 series machine, this cover would not do. However, you don't have to do the math. You could take your cover and you could add a few inches in height and width, and you could figure that all out. But you can also just get a cover that's designed for that size. So this particular cover is designed for the 4 series, 5 series, 7 series, and 8 series. I just was counting. For the Berninas, and this cover would work really well for the big baby locks as well. And if you're like going, "Ooh, I like this idea, but you know, I have a long arm that's desperately in need of a cover," they now have a cover for the sit-down long arms. So like a Q16 or a Q20, or if you have a Sweet 16. You know, if you've got a Capri, all of those kinds of larger sit-down quilting machines. And you don't have to do the math. It is basically the same. So you can see it has the same shapes, and then it's got the gusset. These are specifically designed for Bernina, and you can actually do the applique. So when you look at this machine, this is actually appliqued on, and you can do an applique for your cover. Not going to be as fast as what I just did, but still really cute on there. So just some ideas for you to do for your sewing machine cover. I hope you enjoyed it.